Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for Renaissance Periodization. Video number 1 in the lecture course of Teaching and Modifying Weight Training Technique is the core elements of good technique. Before we can talk about how to teach technique and modify technique, we have to agree on at least the basics of what good technique is and looks like. And there is no doubt lots of controversy from various sources online, which is in a sense good because you never want total consensus on an issue like this, which isn't fully threaded out. But on the other hand, it can also be quite confusing. So the approach we're going to take here is I'm going to outline 7 core elements of good technique that in almost every case apply. There are going to be nuanced exceptions on the edges, but most of the time, you can rely on these core elements as a checklist. It's a checklist that works in 2 ways. It's a checklist you can go through when you are trying a new technique on an exercise that you haven't done before. And if you're hitting all of the checklist items, you can be fairly confident you have good technique. Secondarily, another use of this is to look at an exercise someone is doing. Perhaps it's one of your clients. They sent you a video of them doing some shoulder presses or some upright rows or some squats. And you would like to tell them if their technique is good, if it is not so good, and how they can improve it. And the 7 foundational elements of good technique act as your grading system once again. So they can be used to build good technique, and they can be used to deconstruct and criticize not so good technique. And then if you have an execution of an exercise, a technique of an exercise that, let's say, checks 3 of the 7 boxes, but then you manage to get it to check 6 of the 7 boxes after some corrections, you are almost certainly moving that into a direction of better technique. So to that end, the first core element of good technique is performing a logical and standardized range of motion. I used to say full range of motion, but it turns out there is compelling literature that on at least some exercises, partial ranges of motion may be superior. For example, in various back exercises, getting that last little finish and touching the chest, let's talk about pull-ups. If you can touch your clavicles with pull-ups, that's really cool. But the range of motion from touching your chin to touching your clavicles is an extra 3 inches or so. And it is in that 3 inches that you expose your muscles to tension at a mostly shortened range and not at their lengthened position. And it's been shown more than a few times already that lengthened application of load to the muscle, applying a heavy load at a lengthened position at a stretch to the muscle, is probably superior in hypertrophic yield to applying that same tension or similar tension at a shortened position. And as long as you're doing a large fraction of the range of motion, the top end little bit of lockout or a little bit of pulling at the top of various pulling movements can in some cases not be optimal because it actually causes a little bit more fatigue for the stimulus than we want. And there's more hypertrophy to be had doing somewhat of a partial. For example, doing pull-ups to the chin instead of all the way to the clavicle. So if the range of motion you have chosen is logical, which is to say is either a full range of motion in most cases, or a partial range of motion that accentuates the deep, controlled stretch with a lot of force, then if you can standardize that and say, okay, every time I pull pull-ups, I pull to the chin. If I'm unable to pull to the chin, I consider that failure, but I'm not going to pull all the way to the clavicles because that extra range of motion there isn't the most productive. You have a logical range of motion, you have a standardized range of motion, and then you're checking off that first priority. If you just default most of your clients to full range of motion, that is an excellent place to start in almost all cases. As you develop a more nuanced approach to range of motion and understand the value of some lengthened partials, for example, you can move your clients in some cases to that lengthened partial situation, and still that can be called good technique. But you need standardization so that your lengthened partial isn't different rep distance every time, and you can't really tell, like, was that 10 reps? I could have done 12, but would the range of motion be too small? You have to standardize. And the repetition's range of motion should be logically derived, which is to say either a full range of motion or somehow accentuating whatever part of that range of motion you have determined to make the most sense, using, of course, evidence and reason, not just bro science, like I feel it right here, something like that. So logical and standardized range of motion is number one. And in especially beginner clients and even intermediates, you mostly just want to teach them to do a full range of motion. It is more for intermediate and advanced clients, and maybe yourself included, in which you can start experimenting with some partial range of motion work at loaded stretched positions. Number two, using controlled eccentrics. There are two compelling reasons to use controlled eccentrics. One is that uncontrolled eccentrics, dive bombing or letting the bar fall onto you, is going to be a notable increase in the probability of injury to your clients. The probability of injury in the gym, especially if your clients are fairly weak, is very low in an absolute sense. But you can get a substantial relative reduction by making them control the eccentric and not making them, sort of come out of 50,000 feet and bounce out of the hole with an uncontrolled eccentric. So a big thing is to reduce the risk of injury. In addition to that, the eccentric phase, we have good reason to believe, is possibly, maybe probably, the most muscle growth inducing of all three of the main phases of contraction in a movement: concentric, isometric, and eccentric. Why would you deactivate the musculature on the most productive part of the movement? Now, there's a good reason to do this, quote unquote good reason, and that is the eccentric part's really hard. It drains you of a ton of energy, and you would rather not do it because gravity's helping anyway, so you might as well drop down and then use only concentric force to get more repetitions. But neither you nor your clients are in the gym to get reps. Nobody cares. Nobody except for your RP Hypertrophy app cares how many reps you do. It only cares if the reps are high quality. High quality reps, good technique, means you control the eccentric. Does that mean you do 1 second of a controlled eccentric? Does that mean you do 5 seconds of a controlled eccentric? It doesn't mean either one. Both are good technique. What's an appropriate venue for a first date? You go to dinner, or do you go walk around in the park? Well, both are totally cool. What if you go on a speedboat drag race with known criminals that are shooting at you? Maybe that's the wrong answer. So we can have a lot of right answers and a lot of wrong answers. The eccentric, as long as it's controlled, as long as you're not just dive bombing it or just letting go, you're good to go. A quick controlled eccentric is not a problem. A slow controlled eccentric can be a good thing, but not in all contexts is it mandatory or even a huge net positive over a faster controlled eccentric. Control is the big ticket here. Number three, not cheating. What does cheating mean? Cheating means using movements that are not targeting the core muscle or core movement and doing so in order to get more repetitions. For example, when people cheat in the most classic cheating exercise, which is the barbell bicep curl, they swing. They use their hips. They're using their gluteus muscles, their hamstrings, and muscles of their back in order to get more reps in the ... bicep curl? What muscle is the bicep curl supposed to target? Oh, wait, you can answer. The biceps, correct. Why are we using our glutes? When I posted various videos on YouTube talking about the downsides of cheating, I went through every single thing I could think of as reasons to cheat and refuted every single one. And still, a lot of people got in the comments and did the whole, well, but what about in this case of blah, blah, blah? And I had already refuted all of them. I was like, oh, just watch it 15 minutes and 30 seconds. And they're like, okay. So why is it that people want to cheat so bad? Why is it that your clients are going to want to cheat the movements? It's very simple. Human psychology says that when you give a person a goal and you highly reward that goal, you put a lot of social impetus on that goal, they're going to try to achieve that goal. And if achieving that goal is the central aim, they're going to do interesting things to achieve that goal. Maybe not criminal things, maybe not immoral things, but maybe things that weren't explicitly specified as things you should not do to achieve that goal. So if I'm doing bicep curls, I count a repetition when I get to here. How I get to here, well, of course it's biceps, but if I give just a little bit of an oomph at the bottom, I still get to count that rep. And because I wanted 12 reps today, because last week my RP Hypertrophy app said 12 reps, this week it's a little bit more weight and it says 12 reps. Oh, I got to get it. And if I'm feeling pretty defeated after rep number 10, what's to stop me from hipping in a little? And the answer is you, the coach. You, the coach, doing client video reviews, or you, the personal trainer in person, when they schmig their hips on rep number 11, you go up. No cheating. That rep doesn't count. And those words have echoed through history as terrible insights to your client because they go, oh, crap. And then they actually have to use their target muscles. So cheating is using any kind of movement pattern that they're not supposed to be using to get the intended effect. You can also tell it's cheating if it doesn't occur at the beginning of a movement, but occurs only closer to the end, closer to failure. There's nothing inherent about the nervous system or how humans move that necessitates that technique has to degrade towards the end of a movement. Yes, it's very difficult to resist the temptation of cheating as the pain accumulates and as you desire to get more reps, even though you feel weaker and weaker. But it is something you have to resist, which is why good technique coaching always finds cheating and tries to stamp it out the moment that it is happening. And what you want to do as a trainer is gently, kindly, collaboratively establish a culture of cheating is not what we want. Cheating is not great. We don't want you to cheat. What do I mean by culture? I mean, your clients know that you're not a big fan of cheating. They know why you're not a big fan of cheating. And the why is you want them to have their best results and the lowest probability of injury. And cheating gives you a higher probability of injury because it makes the movement more chaotic. And essentially, when the muscle is already too tired to lift, you're using other muscles to help prod it along. It's like an old man that can't run. You sort of grab him by the elbows and you go run, and he's kind of moving his legs. And as soon as you let him go, he's just going to collapse to the ground. He's not supposed to be running that fast because he can't run that fast. So if your biceps can't curl another rep, what are you doing pushing your hips into it? The biceps are going to have to take the strain at some point. And if they don't, you've avoided injury, but you've caused extra fatigue to the system and no more stimulus to the biceps than they would have had if you just tried to do the rep just with your biceps. When the client understands that the reason we don't do bad technique is because an injury rate for them reduces, is because the fatigue accumulation for them reduces, it is because the stimulus and the muscle growth and the benefits for them increase, they begin to go, wow, okay, I'm bought in. You're bought in. They're bought in. They know you're bought in and you know they're bought in. That's culture. That's when everyone's on the same page. You want to gently, though firmly, reinforce that sort of thing. And over time, your clients are going to start to look at other people in the gym and go, that's bad technique, right? He's cheating. You're like, don't tell him, but yes, don't tell this trainer. Not that you want people talking smack about others, but what that illustrates in the client is a deep buy-in. That's what you want. A huge buy-in to all of technique, but especially that resistance to cheating. And a lot of clients, when they swing their curl, they'll come back down. They go, no, I'm not going to count that. That's what you want to go. Okay, great. Do number 11 now for you. Point number 4. Good technique means adjusting to specific positions that are best for you or your client. Auto-regulating specific positions. Some people think that good technique is when you point your feet straight forward on the squat. Some people say it's when you point your feet out. The reality is, it is whatever technique allows you to hit the range of motion, allows you to feel the target muscle being tensed and burned and pumped, and allows you to make sure that your joints are feeling pretty comfortable in that regard, which means we don't do specific position dogma. Is bench pressing like this good technique or is it like this? It depends, first of all, on the variation of bench press, but even within a given variation like close grip. Some people with small interacromial widths can close grip like this. Some people with larger interacromial widths have to close grip bench much further out. Auto-regulating specific positions is an element of good technique. So when I watch somebody coach, and you can tell the client that their knees and toes naturally point out, and they're coaching them to point them straight forward, and you watch the awkwardness of that, you go, that's bad technique. Now, I wouldn't say that publicly to someone. That's disrespectful to sort of get in the way of another trainer. But if I was with a friend and we were talking quietly in a non-conspicuous way, I'd say, is that good technique? No, it's not. And they would say, okay, so is it the feet pointed forward that's the problem? And I'd say, no, it's the lack of auto-regulating of specific positions. When you notice that your client is more comfortable and more effective in a certain position that is a variation of the general distribution of positions that are possible, that's good technique. And if I watch a coach and he starts having his client just do feet forward squats, then he's like, okay, why don't you put your feet out a little bit and point your toes out and swing your knees out as you go down. When they do that, I'll be like, aha, yes, a gentleman and a scholar, because they're doing point number 4, which is auto-regulating specific positions, which is a core element of good technique. You can say, I know how to coach good technique, but if you only know your good technique, or the good technique that's represented by a sample of 5 of your clients, you run into someone that can't pull off that technique because they're just built different. I'm built different. Sweet, I had to say that. Then your demonstration of if you know good technique or not is going to be incumbent upon, can you make that auto-regulate adjustment for your client? If you can, you're a good trainer. If you can't, you're a worse trainer. Number 5. Not letting non-target muscles limit you. What does that mean? That means that when we are doing an exercise, we have one or several muscles we are targeting. And if our technique is such that our non-target muscles, other muscles that we're not trying to train, are the limiting factor in a hard set, that is bad technique. Not categorically bad, but bad for that specific muscle that we're trying to target. For example, let's say that you are doing dips, and there are 2 ways to do dips for you. If you lean forward, you really feel your front delts. Your triceps don't get a huge stretch at the bottom. You really don't kind of feel them at the bottom. And when you come up, you can tell it's your chest and front delts that are really limiting you. Like the reason you can't do any more reps is because your chest and front delts are tired, not because your triceps are. If you're doing chest/front delt dips, that's good technique. But if you're doing dips to target your triceps, instead of leaning forward, you can lean back a little bit, pushing your elbows back as you go down. Then the limiting factor is the tricep muscle. That is good technique for a tricep dip. So anytime that you see someone, let's say, squatting, and let's say they're squatting in a certain position in a certain way, you say, hey, is that good technique? I can tell you externally it looks good, but I would like to talk to the client to see what is stopping them from doing another rep. If the squat is targeting the quads and they're like, I get in a position, I get in the hole, and then I just can't come out. My quads feel like they're doing stuff, but nothing's happening. I was okay. Your glutes don't feel weak? Like, no, glutes feel totally strong. Lower back feels great. Everything feels fine. It's just my quads don't work. Hey, that's great technique for targeting the quads in the squat. But if we're doing sumo squats, sitting back really far to target the glutes, and your quads are giving out first, that is not the ideal technique, and you can probably do better. This is a big reason, point number 5, why interacting with your clients is critical to being a good online coach and a good personal trainer. Because even if you see a video of them doing a lift, you go, oh, that looks pretty good. Ask them every now and again, hey, where did you feel that? When your set came to an end and you were close to failure, you went to failure, what do you feel like kind of gave out? Was it all around? Maybe you don't know. Sometimes it's like, I've just stopped. I have no idea what's happening. Was it a particular muscle that gave out? If a muscle is giving out that you're not intending, it's not good technique. Here's another really quick example. If you have a client that's doing barbell bent rows, and then finally they drop the bar, you talk to them, you say, hey, how was that? They're like, yeah, it's good. My grip is giving out, and that's why I'm dropping the bar. Even though externally it looks good, it's not good technique. What you would rather have is them put on Versa grips or straps, do 6 more reps with each set, and then their back is giving out, and then it's good technique. Point number 6, of all of the 5 elements that we just covered, point number 6 says, choose from the technique distribution that those 5 elements map to, because there's a lot of variance there. I mean, controlled eccentrics, there's 1 second control, there's 5 second. There is specific position autoregulation, is a whole universe of techniques. Of all of those techniques, the best technique, or the best techniques plural, are the ones that are easiest on the joints of the client. What does that mean? That doesn't mean the joints feel weightless and free. You can only feel that way if you're not loading the joint. But there is a loading of the joint that makes it feel loaded and like, ooh, okay, I can feel my knees getting some work in here. And there is the kind of joint feeling that is painful, that feels like there's shearing going on, that feels like every single rep you do, your joints feel weaker and less stable. something feels off. Now, a lot of clients, they have a lot of what's called kinesiophobia. They're kind of like a bit afraid of movement. Maybe that's why they need your help in the gym. Most people get over that after a few months of you just being quite positive with them and saying, look, you're fine. But of all the different ways you can move, some are going to be not ideal for the joints. They're going to cause a bit more joint pain and creakiness, and some are going to feel much better. The techniques that feel better for the joints are going to be better techniques. For example, for me, if I do skull crushers, just for me, this doesn't apply to everyone, can apply to other people, but not as a rule. If I start skull crushing, my first movement is I keep my elbows stationary, my upper arm stationary, and I come back this way, my elbows hurt. If instead I break at my elbows this way, I take my upper arms and I break down towards my hips, and then I come down, my elbows feel right as rain. So for me, good technique is the breaking and then coming down. Bad technique, worse technique rather, is me just coming back. Now, if you looked at a video of me doing the bad technique, you'd say, that's great technique. It's not, because my joints are in a very nasty position to get a nasty effect from that. Again, this brings up a huge, huge important thing. You have to interact with your client, check in on how their muscles feel, check in on their psychology, check in on how their joints are feeling, pay attention to that over the many weeks and months of training, and you're going to be doing a much better job to guarantee that both externally and internally, good technique is being practiced. Lastly, going too light or too heavy can interfere with technique, mostly because it interferes with some of the other things we're talking about. Here's an example. If you take an assisted pull-up machine, throw your client in there, and you give them so much resistance in addition to their load that, or in opposition to their load rather, you make it so easy on them that on the way down, they don't get a deep stretch because they'd have to push to get a deep stretch. And on the way up, they can technically let go for a few seconds and grab again. You can have what is externally good technique, but internally the muscle isn't getting stimulated. It's just too light of an exercise. In addition, some clients will be a little bit tight. And if they're doing body weight squats, maybe they can't hit the appropriate position. They can't hit depth. Their back starts to round, because only if they load the squat heavier does it let them click into position. Anything else is too light of a load. On the other hand, probably much more common, even if you can do good technique up until a certain load, sometimes the load gets too heavy. Exercises like shoulder lateral raises. Because of the construction and the proprioception you have around your glenohumeral joint in the shoulder, doing sets of 5 in the lateral raise just is going to feel bad in almost every case. In almost every case, it's going to violate point number 6, which is it's not going to be easy on your joints. And the movement pattern can look identical, but it's no good for you. All you do is lighten the weight, and all of a sudden, the same external appearance technique is actually great technique on all of these because it corresponds to having great feeling with your joints. So before you throw away an exercise, saying, man, they just can't get the technique right on this, try to experiment with some lighter loading, some moderate loading, and some heavier loading to see where in that loading range their technique can be the best, where they can have the best perception of how tensed their muscles are and how much work their muscles are doing, and also the perception of the joints taking the least bad kind of painful recurring beating. That's all I got. Folks, see you next time for the next lecture.